So there was a video clip that started getting circulated yesterday where Trump is talking about a new form of citizenship or something akin to a green card, which they're referring to as a gold card. I've got the clip ready to go. Lucas, you said this is not something new, that this has been in existence from previously. Is it just that he increased the price, or what's your take on what's going on here while I get that clip queued up?
Sure. Howard Lutnick, the Secretary of Commerce, also addressed this idea of the American Gold Card, and he gave more details about it. And this is going to be piggybacked on a visa program called the EB-5 visa, which has been available since 1990 to foreign nationals who want to invest in the United States. And the threshold is going up to $5 million. That's part of the change to this gold card. It was initially, I believe, $500,000, and then raised to $900,000, and then raised again. But anyway, this is an old program. We'll get into it more, but let's hear from President Trump, and then we'll dive in more.
We're going to be doing something else. It's going to be very good. We're going to be selling a gold card. You have a green card. This is a gold card. We're going to be putting a price on that card of about $5 million, and that's going to give you green card privileges plus. It's going to be a route to citizenship, and wealthy people will be coming into our country by buying this card. They'll be wealthy, and they'll be successful, and they'll be spending a lot of money and paying a lot of taxes and employing a lot of people. And we think it's going to be extremely successful. And never been done before or anything like this, but it's something that we're going to be putting out over the next, would you say 2 weeks out? You want to say a couple of words about it? Sure.
Well, I think maybe that was Lutnick's comments that were coming up there.
Oh, should I have let it play out longer?
If it would have played, but no, let's just talk about it, because I think meh. Let's just get into it.
Yep, let's go.
So EB-5 visa. Are you familiar with the EB-5 visa?
Tell me more. This is something I don't have a lot of familiarity with.
Well, I have a medium amount of familiarity, and I will maybe lay some background into it, because some people might be shocked to find out that that citizenship is for sale. But in my life, I had a family member who moved to Costa Rica and wanted to become a citizen or a resident of Costa Rica. And that person lived in Costa Rica and tried for years, maybe some close to 5 years, to get residency there. And it was a charade of legal proceedings and misfiled paperwork and changeover in lawyers and God knows what else. And one day I was visiting, and we were talking about this issue with a Tika, a lady who owned a restaurant in the town where my relative lived, and she looked at us and said, "You're crazy." She said, "All you got to do is start a business." She said, "Open up a bookstore in the front room of my restaurant, and you'll be a citizenship in no time." And she was 100% correct. So it was at that point in my life that I became very aware that if I wanted to move to other places in the world, then opening up a business or proving, net worth opened up very different channels for possibilities. And that's true in most countries of the world, certainly true in the United States.
So this EB-5, this is an investment or an investor program. So if you're coming in here with money and you intend to start a business and invest in U.S. companies and start U.S. companies, this is your fast track route to do that.
Yes, and there are actually other. The EB-5 is one that gives access to the green card, but there are there are other programs. There are a number of different visa programs and criteria that, like the E2 visa, is a shorter window, 3 months to 5 years. But the EB5 is a long-term investment vehicle. So, or a long-term visa for immigrant investors. And it was established in 1990, which I think is curious because, or notable and curious, because this is the point of the end of the Cold War, or what we thought would be the end of the Cold War, in the wake of the collapse of the Soviet socialist republics. And it was. I sent you a graphic, by the way, if you get a chance to pop it up on the screen, because you can see in that graphic how little it was used in the first couple of years. And I would say in part that had to do with the limited number of people who could afford it around the world. But you see that steadily increase, and especially the number of EB5 EB5 visa holders really ramps up in 2009. And the demographics of it are also interesting because the early holders of EB5 visas are from South Korea and Japan, countries that have very close commercial ties with the United States and had seen wealth coming from that. But in 2003, we really ramp up our trade with China, and that's whenever the trade imbalance with China begins to steadily increase. And so starting in 2008, 2009, a lot of these numbers are actually Chinese immigrants. And later that's augmented with Indian immigrants. And we also had a lot of investment and commercial relations in India, as we think about American companies outsourcing their labor into India, and the boom effect that had there in those years. So anyway, now you could also see a drop in COVID years in the number of, no surprise there. But other than that, you see that there's a substantial amount of maybe not that substantial. It's 10,000 isn't a huge number, but it's certainly not rare. And this is people paying $500,000 and later $900,000. I think in 2022 the minimum threshold was increased. But paying investing in businesses in targeted employment areas, as the stipulations of the visa criteria say. So you have to invest in rural or high unemployment areas in the United States and bring some sort of business there that's going to bring employment. And the quid pro quo for that is a green card, now gold card.
So what do you make of him rebranding it or calling it the gold card? Is that just marketing fluff, or do you think that this is going to confer additional benefits or access or something like that? Is this really a premium service? Should we think about it like premium streaming services or stuff like that? Is this the blue check mark for the United States? Is that Elon's influence here?
Yeah, yes, in a way it is a blue check mark. But I think there's more going on here. One, yes, it's rebranding. So I think it's important to bear in mind as we are bound to hear some voices that are decry American citizenship for sale, oligarchies, et cetera, et cetera. One, we should be aware and very aware that this has been going on for quite some time. And two, I think we should color it with context in, before 1990, I don't know how common this was. And certainly look at, 2000. I didn't get the numbers for the early 90s, but it was very low in the 90s, like maybe sub 100. And through the 2000s, we see how rare it is to be buying and selling, quote unquote, buying and selling citizenship. But going back to our ideas of nation states, and we talked about nation being the place where you're born, there is increased awareness or conversation with regards to dual citizenship, and also, ideas like if people are given citizenship to the or attain, not given, because they have to go through a lot of hoops to get it, but if they attain citizenship to the United States or some other country, there are ideas that maybe we are living in a world where previous citizenship should be forfeited, and I think that that is a nod towards the increased phenomena of people holding dual citizenships or having more access to move around the world. And so that's going on in one hand. As to the rebranding, I think the amount, the threshold being raised is part of it too. I don't know how much the criteria for investment is going to be, and I'm not sure what sort of visa, if there's any visa programs that exist for fabulously wealthy people. But we also had the H-1B visa conversation earlier, right at the new year. With Doge, Elon, Vivek Ramaswamy, and conversations between MAGA and Maha Republicans who were very opposed to the notion of H-1B visas. It will be interesting. I would imagine that they have less of a problem with the idea of the EB-5 visa being more popular or coming to more prominence. I don't know what if there is a minimum on the number that are given out a year. But also think about Roger Ver. Roger Ver is not a citizen of Spain. He's a citizen of Turks and what's that island in the Antilles?
Turks and Caicos.
Caicos. Thank you. Turks and Caicos. And I think he paid $2 million for that. And this also goes to, if you think about the what the United States was doing with regards to cracking down on terrorism around the world in the wake of 9/11, we one of the things that we did was begin to exert sanctions and sort of flex the authority of the United States or the power of the United States with regards to the SWIFT payment system. And in one part, that was targeted towards small nations. So I don't know if you remember the island off of Australia that is now a
Is that Tasmania? Is that Tasmania? Is that what we're talking about?
No, much smaller. Nauru,
Nauru.
Nauru. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the story of Nauru, but Nauru was originally an island that had a lot of guano or bird shit on it that was put on ships and sent around the world. It's sort of part of the opening green revolution, the original green revolution that was based on fertilizer, and then it had it's very small island, then it had nothing. And so what did it become? It became a dark banking center, a dark internet center. And the United States was cracking down on small nations like that. And one thing, think also, why was FTX in the what was it, in the Bahamas? I forget. But it was on another small private island. And part of one of the things that small islands offer is more lax financial regulations. And the United States was very interested in forcing, 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 the United forcing openness, at least to the United States, with regards to who was transacting money. And so this was one of the revenues. And if you think about it, like giving or selling citizenship to a couple of rich people with a very small population can have a large impact. And when the when the dark banking game was drying up for small island nations around the world, some of them started selling citizenship, like Turks and Caicos, and so, you know, I think like Gresham's law, which is a monetary phenomenon, applies also to citizenship. Once somebody starts selling citizenships to their country, it makes a lot of sense for other countries in the world to also do the same thing. And so I have not thought this was a phenomenon that we were going to see go away, but one that we would see increase. And I think that our
Well,
understand. Go ahead.
part of the big story here then is not necessarily that this is something new, but that the cost has gone up substantially. If this was $900,000 before, or whatever the cost was, that it just got 5 times more expensive to get this.
Yeah, I think that is part of the story. And even when in 2022, when the cost was raised from 500,000 to 900,000, there was actually a lot of pushback from rich people around the world who were, and this was piggybacked by, you know, the law firms who provide immigration services to attract clientele to the United States. So there was actually a case that was brought against the rule change. I guess the rule change occurred earlier, uh, probably by probably by Immigration and Nationalization Services, and then had to go through the route of being passed in Congress through a law. So yes, I think that is part of the story. And going back to this chart that we have, and bearing in mind the trade imbalance between United States and China, and where the large number of holders of these EB-5 visas are coming from, like, part of the narrative is how does anyone get 5 million US dollars, and or how did they get $500,000? And so part of that speaks to the trade imbalance of the United States, and the money that we produce and send around the world. So in some way, this is a reverse straw, or moving the straw back into the United States, which makes a little bit of sense. But there's also a nuance to this story with the amount of dollars that have leaked outside of our borders, especially as our foreign aid spending, whether through congressional channels or whether through the U.S. Agency for International Development. But there's a lot of money that is out. A lot of U.S. dollars exists outside of the United States. This is one way to bring them back in.
So if we calculate this out, something to the tune of, I don't know, 8,000 to 10,000 people participating, and this is not some, life-changing amount of money for the United States, but, if it brings in more revenue, and, this program is already being used, I guess it's a way to increase the coffers, I suppose. What does this pay for? Maybe half an hour of spending in the United States, something like that.
Well, hopefully,
We got to put this into perspective.
yeah, well, about half an hour. That might be right. Thomas Massey would be the person to ask for that. I've also seen in a timeline recently, talks from or ideas floated from Democrats about lowering the voting age even more. And questions as to who deserves, even with the immigration or the illegal immigrant situation that we have in the United States today, and different ideas, or yeah, well, I would say ideas, different expectations as to who deserves to vote. And I think this gets into a question as to, do you own a business? Do you own taxes? If we're getting away from notions of birthright citizen status, then we begin to open up a meritocracy idea. And um, I I'm very I don't mean to laud the notion of only attracting uh, rich immigrants from around the world, but I think opening up the idea of immigration, like, to more broadly, to um, who's coming and who deserves to be a citizen, than just like, is it the smartest people around the world, um, which was the narrative that we had before this. I mean, obviously there were other ways to get into the United States, but the broad narrative that we had about, who deserves to come to the United States was, well, give us your best. And I'm interested to see that opened up as much as possible. I think we look for a world in where it's
Wait a
possible
minute.
for people
I'm
to move
reminded
around.
of what's inscribed at the bottom of the Statue of Liberty. Did it say your best? I gotta look this up. I thought it was the huddled masses, something
Well,
something. Your
that's
poor,
a
your
poem
desperate.
by that's the Emma Lazarus poem,
I
which
thought that was actually inscribed on there. I mean, you have all of these folk tales of the United States. You learn these things in school, and then you find out, no, 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 that was never a thing. That was not how it was.
well, and I mean, remember that the Statue of Liberty was a gift given to us by France, and so maybe they were trying to also share some ideas of French egalitarianism, but um, yeah, give us your poor, your huddled masses. It's a poem by Emma Lazarus, if you want to look it up.
I mean, we
Uh,
definitely need an update to that poem. So it's like, give us your $5 million and your gold card will be remitted. It's I think that there's poet laureates out there that aren't doing their job to, like, actually codify this stuff. It's
well, I ascribe to the values espoused by Emma Lazarus, and I think that is what we should be seeking to do. So, um, but it, again, it's how we look at it, and if we understand this as a move away from birthright nationalism, um, I think it's a good thing. So, oh, there were um, there was something else that I wanted to bring up with regards to this, and I just lost my train of thought. You got me off on Emma Lazarus, and then I was thinking also of well, what's the poem? Have the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. Have the profiteers satisfied their greed? Is there some soldier's wife ever in need? Um, I'm gonna have to. I'm gonna. What are you thinking,
well,
Grant?
what I'm thinking here is just that there's a lot of things that happen in the media where we see a short video clip, and I'm reminded of the Elon Musk one where it was circulated. Oh, look, he's leaving his kid behind, and then you watch this thing with a little bit more context, and it's like, well, he didn't leave his kid behind. It's like he got a little bit ahead. He noticed that you turn around. I mean, this oftentimes happens. You think your kid is right there with you, and then all of a sudden you turn around, and you're like, no, come on, hurry up. And that's exactly what happened. And so I feel like it's the same kind of a thing. This will be taken out of context. Like, United States citizenship is not for sale, and this will be the hoot and cry that we hear on, media, that Trump is selling citizenship. And when you put this into the broader context, what you learn is this has been going on for a long time, and that all countries are really participating in this. This is something that is not new. This has definitely been happening before, and it's just that you didn't know about it. So welcome to the world. You have now learned about it. That's I think that's just part of life. Is most people don't have to go through any kind of a visa program because they haven't had exposure to it. And until you've been around and had some dealings with these things, you wouldn't necessarily know about them. So it's no fault of yours that you don't know, but there isn't anything really big to know about here except for that it got more expensive. made it a little bit harder. So I guess that's my takeaway from this, is that these programs existed. They were underutilized until recently, like the last, 15, 20 years is when this has really started to take off. And it's now really a lot harder to get involved in this than it has been in the past. So I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. I think the people who had the money to spend $900,000 to get in probably weren't scraping together $900,000. So this is a bit more extractive of the people who have already had access to it. They got to pay up a little bit more, but they probably already have it. So this isn't like they get to pass it on to somebody else. This is just capturing some of the wealth of, the wealthy. This is the 1%, people who can pay $1 million to get access to the U.S. System.
It would be interesting if this also went to a market and quotas instead. So we could be
like an auction. Like there's only so many. Bid it up. Whoever bids
absolutely,
the most. Minimum bid is 5 million.
Which is also, yeah, it's also a great departure from the quota systems that we've seen before, which was just, who gets to Ellis Island first, and at a certain time of the year we reach that quota and we stop accepting ships. Like futures in immigration. Let's be auctioning off like how much people want to pay for that green card. I think that's a better system. And if we see a if we see if we see less diversity in what people's bags are, more people might have access or be able to move to other places in the world too. Rusty, did you have something?
Oh, I was just going to put a comment in there that if we end up doing the auction style, it's going to have to be a Dux auction. We're going to have to start high and go low with these people and just see how much money we can actually squeeze out of them.
Interesting that you bring up a Dutch auction. I often think the Dutch are, there's a line of anti-communism through the United States. It's often targeted at Russia. It has inextricable associations with slavery in America, serfdom in Russia, but then we turn around and we love the Dutch. We love New York City, which was a commercial city, an outpost of the Dutch Empire and their paradigm of empire throughout the world. And the Dutch were a commune. But going also to these notions of empire, I think we need to also bear in mind what was going on in Rome. There's a lot of romanticization. There's a lot of love in American political history of the Roman Empire and Roman ideals. And when I look at the history of Rome, and I hate the phrase, by the way, the rise and fall of Rome, because many ideas that were in the Roman Empire have continued in the world. But the most important statistic, I think, to bear in mind when you look at Roman history is what was the size of the army and what were the avenues to citizenship? Because in some way, the way that the Roman Empire expanded and lasted for so long or any amount of time was by selling citizenship. And it sold citizenship through military service. And it also required of conquered territories.
We do that too, right? I mean, is that still a path to citizenship in the United States? I seem to remember it being one.
If not a path of citizenship, it is a path. It is a path like through to the middle or upper class, to at least to the middle class.
I think you're correct, Grant. I think that there is a thing where if you join the military service of the United States and do a full 4 years, you do get your citizenship granted to you.
Did you ever run across that in your time? Did you meet
I don't know
anybody?
if I don't remember meeting anybody that was utilizing that or taking advantage of it, but I do remember hearing about it, and I remember hearing something about it. So I think that it is something that Grant was right on.
If we also look at the immigration tensions that are going on in Europe, and we look back, where did those begin? Those began as um, as England and France especially opened up immigration to their colonies. And why did they open up immigration to their colonies? Well, it was in the wake of world wars, and it was becoming unpopular to send your military down and to visibly coerce and subjugate various colonies throughout the world. And so what did they do? They opened up channels of immigration. And they didn't open up like full citizenship, but they opened up some measure of citizenship so that they could hold on to um, the identity and especially the market and the commerce of these various colonies around the world. And so, in some ways we talk about this as if it's just going on here or Europe, and we say, why do the Democrats want to let in so many immigrants? Why do the leftist governments in Europe want to let in immigrants? And the answer is because it's a better tool to maintain relationship with other countries in the world than sending your military to coerce the people of another country.
So really, we have a lot of immigration stuff that's been happening in the Trump administration. And I think a lot of this was promised during the campaign, that they said this was things that would be acted on pretty quickly. So we have actions at the border, we have deportations potentially taking place, we have revisions to the H-1B visa program, which have been proposed. Now we have the EB-5. Seems like a lot of this is playing out exactly the way that they had advertised it during the campaign. Are you surprised at all to see this? Did we hear about this during the campaign, or is this kind of a bit of a surprise?
I mean, in the campaign, I said the most important issue that they're discussing, because they weren't discussing our national debt and how to get out of that, but the most important issue that was on the table for discussion was immigration. And it seemed to me that was like the defining promise that the Trump administration was making. I've been surprised. The press secretary, and I can't remember her name off the top of my head, Catherine Levitt, maybe. The press secretary, whenever she stood up to address the press corps on Trump's first day, the very first thing that she said was that, because in the campaign also, let's rewind. In the campaign, I also found it interesting that the narrative was about immigrants who were criminals and deporting them. And whenever Caroline Levitt, sorry, Miss Levitt, whenever she stood up, she said, it is the position of this administration that we're going to be deporting everybody, because if you came into this country illegally, you broke a law, and thus you are a criminal. And so that surprised me, but I'm also I'm not that surprised whenever I look at the breakdown of the money tree, and the magic money creation that's been going on, because as there is less faith in the creation of that money, and there is more uncertainty in the minds of Americans, in the minds of other countries of the world, both people and administrations of those countries, then we come back to a place where we have to figure out who deserves for a limited amount of pie, rather than the endless cornucopia of pie that we've had before. And I thought that question was unavoidable politically. And so as we come to that, as we come to beginning to answer who deserves part of a piece of political pie that is limited, then I would rather see a world in which you can jump from pie to pie, and you're not tied to the place where you are born, and or just being smart, like, oh, you can come to the United States because you're smart. Well, that's also a very limited immigration policy. So opening it up to the markets, to this magical thing that we've created called money and doled out around the world, opening that door wider and beginning to think about uh, other avenues or inputs that people can bring in order to gain access to the pie, I think is a question that we have to answer politically, and it is unavoidable, because the notion of the endless pie, the endless cornucopia, of endless efficiency or endless resources doesn't hold true. The world is round. The world is not a flat, ever expanding disk, and there are a limited amount of resources, and so we need to have discussions that are about what do you deserve of a limited pie, not just always more.
I got to imagine that something's going to be on the table for farm workers and for temporary style workers that want to come in. I just can't imagine that this whole idea that they're going to boot everybody out that isn't properly documented. There's just too much of this that's going on to allow that system to grind to a halt. So I gotta imagine that we're going to see something coming down from the White House on this pretty soon.
You know, we used to have a program called, and I may butcher this, but I want to say the Lucero program or the uh, Vicero program, but we used to have a we used to have exactly that, which was for agricultural workers, especially coming from Mexico, and again around 1990. And think to the Contract of America and the push from the right in closing in closing immigration quotas back then. That was one of the programs that we got rid of, and so instead of having a a legal, like, short-term pathway, going back to, say, like the E2 visa, a 3-month or less pathway for people to come in and work in the United States, everything got pushed off the books. And that, if we have programs where people can come in on the books legally, like through some legal avenue of uh, to cross the border and to come join in the workforce of another country, that also makes it more fair for the lower class people in who are already United States citizens. Because whenever it got pushed off the books, you saw a greater separation between, what the acceptable wage for somebody off the books was versus somebody on the books. So again, I think you're right about, we're going to see those programs come back, because again, think back to the how do we say this, the traditional Republican, not the Maha MAGA populist Republican, but the business owning Republican. They want to see that cheap labor, and they are going to be looking for programs and avenues to create that possibility. So I think having things open and accounted for is what we need, or will be a better future. So I don't know if you have anything else that you want to wrap up in this conversation, but I'm I'm glad we talked about the gold card and immigration. It's one of the most important issues on our table, not just here in the United States, but around the world.
I love it when we can bring a little bit of clarity to what seem to be hot button topics. This is something we love to do on FOMO. It's like we see something that sort of looks like it's entering into the public discourse, the discussion. Can we help bring a little bit of light on what's really going on here? I feel like we did it, so nothing else to add on my side. Again, I'm really glad we did this, because it's the kind of thing where it's easy to get caught up in the furor of the day, right? It's the what are we supposed to hate? What are we supposed to get mad about? And rather than doing that, let's take a step back and see if there's more to unpack here, if there's bigger context. So yeah, anytime we can do that, I think it's time well spent. So love that we dove into this subject today on FOMO. Nothing else to add on my side.
And I got to go all the way back to Roman history. Oh, when have I done that?
Every show.
No, I avoid Roman history, but today I went back to Roman history.
Love that. All right. Well, we'll catch you next time on FoMO.